Alright, so tonight I want to tell you a story that started in one of the most normal places you can imagine. The gym. Most people think of the gym as a routine environment. You show up, put your headphones on, do your workout, maybe nod at a few familiar faces, and then head home. After a while, you start recognizing the regulars. You don't know their life stories, but you see them enough that they become part of the background of your day. That's exactly how it was for a guy named Nolan. Nolan had been going to the same gym for nearly 2 years, usually in the evenings after work. Over time, he had gotten used to seeing the same handful of people almost every day. Some of them were serious lifters, some were casual gym goers, and others were the kind who mostly talked more than they lifted. But there was one guy he started noticing more than most, a guy named Josh. At first, Josh didn't seem strange at all. In fact, he seemed like a typical gym regular. He usually worked out alone, focused on heavy lifts, and didn't bother many people. Eventually, the two of them started having quick conversations between sets. You know, the kind of conversations that happen naturally in gyms. One person asks what muscle group you're training that day. Someone else asks if a bench is free. Maybe someone recommends a supplement or complains about how crowded the place gets in the evenings. It was all very normal. Over time, those short conversations became a little longer. Josh seemed friendly enough, maybe slightly awkward, but nothing that stood out as concerning. One day during a workout, Josh asked Nolan if he had Instagram. He said he liked sharing workout routines and motivational stuff with people from the gym. Nolan didn't see any problem with that, so he followed him. For the first few days, everything stayed normal. Josh would occasionally send gym memes or short clips of workouts, but slowly, the messages started becoming more frequent. Sometimes, he would send long paragraphs about training ideas. Sometimes, he would send voice messages. And that's when Nolan first noticed something a little strange. In those voice messages, Josh would do these exaggerated cartoon-like voices, almost like he was doing impressions of characters from animated shows. At first, Nolan thought maybe Josh just had a weird sense of humor, but the tone of the voices felt off. They weren't really funny. They were just uncomfortable to listen to. Nolan didn't know how to respond, so most of the time he just gave short replies or reacted with a simple emoji. Eventually, Nolan started ignoring some of the messages altogether. A couple weeks later, while they were both at the gym, Josh walked over between sets and mentioned that there was a local festival happening downtown that weekend. It was supposed to have food trucks, live music, and a bunch of people hanging out. Josh asked Nolan if he wanted to go. Nolan hesitated for a second, because they had never actually hung out outside the gym before. But it sounded like a normal event, and he didn't want to seem rude, so he agreed. When the weekend came, Nolan met Josh near the entrance of the festival. Right away, something felt different about him. At the gym, Josh had always seemed calm and quiet, but that night, he was acting extremely energetic, almost restless. He talked quickly, jumping from topic to topic without finishing his thoughts. He laughed loudly at things that weren't even jokes. At first, Nolan assumed maybe Josh had just had a few drinks before arriving. But the longer they walked around the festival, the stranger his behavior became. Eventually, Josh started doing those same cartoon voices from the voice messages. Except now he was doing them out loud in the middle of the crowd. loud enough that people walking nearby were turning their heads. Nolan laughed awkwardly because he didn't know how else to react, but inside he felt increasingly uncomfortable. At one point, Josh leaned close to Nolan and slowly said his name in that same exaggerated voice. He dragged the name out in a way that made Nolan's skin crawl. Nolan tried to brush it off and change the subject, but Josh kept doing it throughout the night. Every few minutes, he would repeat Nolan's name again in that strange tone. The whole situation started feeling surreal. Nolan kept thinking about how different Josh seemed compared to how he acted in the gym. Eventually, the festival started winding down, and Nolan used that as an excuse to leave. He told Josh he had an early morning workout and needed to head home. Josh seemed disappointed, but didn't argue. Nolan went home, hoping the night had just been a weird, one-time experience. But the messages from Josh started increasing again over the next few days. He would send multiple texts in a row if Nolan didn't respond. Sometimes he would send random voice messages using those same unsettling voices. Nolan started replying less and less. Then one night, Josh invited him out again, this time to a bar. He told Nolan that a couple other people from the gym were planning to meet them there too. That made Nolan feel a little more comfortable about going. Being in a group sounded a lot better than hanging out one-on-one again. So he agreed to meet him. When Nolan arrived at the bar, Josh was already there, sitting at a table. Nolan asked where the other people from the gym were. Josh casually said they were running late. They ordered drinks and waited. But after nearly an hour, it became clear that no one else was coming. Nolan started to get the uncomfortable feeling that maybe those other people had never been invited at all. As the night went on, Josh started acting strange again, even stranger than at the festival. He began doing the cartoon voices again, but now he mixed them with exaggerated laughing sounds. One moment, he would burst into loud, fake laughter. Then suddenly, he would switch to fake crying noises before snapping back to normal. People at nearby tables kept glancing over. Nolan felt embarrassed just sitting there. Every few minutes, Josh would lean toward him and repeat his name again in that same creepy tone. Nolan finally decided he'd had enough. He finished his drink quickly and told Josh he needed to head out. Josh didn't try to stop him, but as Nolan stood up, Josh quietly repeated his name one more time in that drawn-out voice. Nolan left the bar feeling uneasy the entire drive home. After that night, he made the decision to distance himself completely. He blocked Josh on Instagram and stopped responding to any messages. At the gym, he started changing his schedule slightly, so their workout times wouldn't overlap. For a couple weeks, it seemed like the problem had solved itself. Nolan didn't see Josh at the gym anymore, and the messages stopped. Life went back to normal. But then one night something happened that made Nolan realize the situation might not actually be over. It was close to midnight, and he was lying in bed, scrolling through his phone. His bedroom window faced the side yard of the house, where there was usually nothing but darkness at night. While he was lying there, he thought he heard something faint outside. At first, it sounded like the wind moving through the trees, but then he heard it again, a whisper. It was so quiet, he couldn't tell if it was real or just his imagination. Nolan sat up slowly and listened. For a few seconds, everything was silent. Then the whisper came again, and this time it clearly sounded like someone saying his name, slowly, very softly. Nolan felt his chest tighten. The way the name was said sounded disturbingly familiar. It sounded exactly like the strange voice Josh used. Nolan stayed completely still, staring at the dark outline of the window. A few seconds later, the whisper came again, dragging out his name in that same unsettling tone. Nolan's heart started racing. For several moments, he was too afraid to even move. Finally, he forced himself to get out of bed and step closer to the window to look outside. But by the time he pulled the curtain aside, there was nothing there, just darkness and the quiet yard outside his house. Nolan stood there for a long time, staring out the window, trying to convince himself he must have imagined it. Eventually, he went back to bed, but sleep didn't come easily that night. And deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that someone might have been standing outside his window, whispering his name. Nolan tried to convince himself the whisper outside his window had just been his imagination, because the alternative was too unsettling to accept. And for the next couple of days, he kept replaying the moment in his head while going through his normal routine of work, dinner, and the gym he had recently switched to across town, telling himself that if someone had really been outside his house, he would have seen footprints, heard movement, or noticed something unusual in the yard the next morning. But he hadn't seen anything at all. And that explanation helped him relax slightly until 2 nights later, when he was lying in bed again around the same time, scrolling through his phone in the quiet darkness of his room. When he heard the same faint sound near the window, and this time he immediately froze because he knew exactly what he was about to hear before it even happened. And a moment later, the whisper returned, soft but clear, slowly stretching out his name in that same unnatural voice that sent a cold shiver down his spine. And Nolan's heart began pounding so loudly he could feel it in his ears as he stared toward the window, hoping desperately that he was wrong about whose voice it sounded like. But then the whisper came again, repeating his name in the same drawn-out tone. And this time, Nolan forced himself to stand up and walk toward the window, even though every instinct in his body told him not to. And just before he pulled the curtain aside, he spoke loudly through the glass and said that if anyone was out there, they needed to leave immediately because he would call the police. And the whispering stopped, leaving only silence outside. But as Nolan slowly moved the curtain, he noticed something shift in the darkness near the edge of the yard. A faint shadow moving quickly away from the window before disappearing into the night. And that brief movement was enough to confirm the worst possibility in his mind, that someone really had been standing outside, listening and whispering, though he couldn't prove who it was. And Nolan barely slept that night because every small sound outside made him sit up again, expecting the whisper to return. But it didn't. And the next morning, he walked around the yard checking for anything unusual, but again, found nothing that clearly proved someone had been there. Though the uneasy feeling followed him through the rest of the week, until one morning when he stepped outside to go to work, and immediately noticed that something looked wrong with his car, because one of the tires was completely flat. And when he got closer, he saw a long, clean slice in the rubber that looked like it had been cut with something sharp. And that moment made his stomach drop, because flat tires can happen randomly. But a clean cut like that doesn't usually appear by accident. And Nolan suddenly felt certain that whoever had been whispering outside his window had also been standing in his driveway sometime during the night, which pushed him to take the situation more seriously than he had before. So that same day, he installed security cameras around the outside of his house and began paying close attention to anyone unfamiliar near his neighborhood. And he also made the decision to completely avoid the gym where he had originally met Josh, choosing instead to drive across town to a different gym at different hours. And over the following weeks, the strange events slowly stopped. There were no more whispers at the window and no more damage to his car. But Nolan still never fully relaxed, because the experience had changed the way he thought about people he barely knew from daily routines. And although he never saw Josh again, he couldn't shake the possibility that the voice outside his window had belonged to him, and that the only reason it stopped was because Nolan had removed himself from the routine where Josh used to see him every day. And that unsettling realization stuck with him long after the events ended. But Nolan's story isn't the only strange experience connected to a gym environment, because another account came from a 22-year-old named Louis who lived with his friend Colton. And Colton had recently gone through a messy breakup with his ex-girlfriend Addie after months of arguments and constant tension in their relationship. And according to Colton, the breakup had been necessary because the relationship had become extremely toxic, with frequent fights and jealousy that made everyday life exhausting. But the problem was that when the relationship ended, Addie refused to accept it and began sending Colton endless texts and calls, asking to talk or demanding explanations. And when those messages didn't get the responses she wanted, the tone gradually shifted from pleading to angry, which eventually led Colton to block her number and remove her from all of his social media accounts, hoping that distance would finally put an end to the situation. And for a while it seemed like it had worked, because several weeks passed without any contact from her at all, until one afternoon when Louis and Colton were working out together, and Louis noticed a woman wearing a hoodie and baseball cap standing near one of the machines across the room, watching them in a way that seemed slightly too focused. Though at first he assumed she was simply waiting for equipment to become available. But after they moved to another area of the gym, he noticed that the same woman had somehow ended up nearby again. And when she finally walked past them, Louis got a clear look at her face and recognized her immediately as Addie, despite the obvious attempt to disguise herself with the hat and hood. And when he quietly pointed her out, Colton immediately looked frustrated and muttered that he had hoped she wouldn't try something like that. But instead of confronting her, he suggested they just ignore it and continue their workout, believing that if they didn't give her attention, she would eventually leave. Yet throughout the rest of their time at the gym, Addie seemed to appear near them repeatedly, as if she were deliberately following their movements, which created an uncomfortable atmosphere that made both of them want to finish their workout quickly. And at one point, when Louis went into the locker room, he noticed Addie standing near the entrance area just outside, staring in his direction with an odd smile before turning away when she realized he had noticed her. And that brief moment gave him a strange, uneasy feeling that he couldn't fully explain. So when he returned to the gym floor, he told Colton they should probably leave early, which they did, assuming the situation would end there. But later that night, Louis was home alone while Colton had gone out to pick up food when he suddenly heard a loud bang against the front door that startled him enough to jump up from the couch, followed by another harder hit that made the door shake in its frame. and when he cautiously approached the hallway and looked through the peephole, he felt his stomach tighten because Addie was standing outside the door with an angry expression, grabbing the handle and shaking it while laughing loudly in a way that sounded completely unstable. And before Louis could even react, his phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number that he quickly realized belonged to Addie. The message reading simply, "Tell Colton to come outside," and seconds later, another message appeared with a photo attached, showing a knife held in someone's hand, which made Louis step back from the door immediately and call Colton to explain what was happening before dialing the police. And during those few minutes, Addie continued pounding on the door and shouting while laughing in a way that echoed through the quiet street outside, until finally the sound of approaching police cars became audible in the distance. And when the lights appeared at the end of the street, Addie suddenly stopped banging on the door and attempted to walk away casually across the lawn as if nothing unusual had been happening. But the officers arriving on the scene saw her immediately and stopped her before she could leave, questioning her right there outside the house and eventually placing her under arrest while Louis watched through the window in disbelief. And after that night, neither he nor Colton ever saw her again. But the experience left them both shaken by how quickly someone's behavior could escalate when emotions and obsession mixed together. And the final account comes from a 25-year-old who used to work out regularly at a branch of LA Fitness where he began noticing a man who appeared at the gym almost every day but rarely seemed to actually exercise, instead sitting on different machines for long periods while watching people across the room. And at first, the narrator didn't pay much attention to it because gyms are full of people with unusual habits. But after several weeks, he realized that whenever he looked up between sets, the same man was staring directly at him without any expression, which gradually became impossible to ignore, though the man never spoke or approached him directly. And one evening, after finishing his workout, the narrator decided to stop by a nearby bar to relax for a while, only to feel a familiar sense of unease when the same silent man walked in about 30 minutes later and sat at a table across the room while once again staring in his direction without saying a word, which made the narrator uncomfortable enough to finish his drink quickly and leave, hoping it was simply coincidence. But a few days later, he went for a run along a trail through a nearby nature preserve where the paths wound through quiet wooded areas. And about halfway through his run, he heard footsteps behind him matching his pace exactly. And when he glanced over his shoulder, he felt a wave of panic because the runner following him was the same silent man from the gym, running just far enough behind to avoid speaking yet close enough to remain clearly visible. And when the narrator increased his speed, the footsteps behind him also became faster. And when he slowed slightly, the same thing happened again, as if the man was deliberately mirroring his movement, which made the situation feel increasingly threatening as the empty trail stretched ahead with no other people around. So, the narrator suddenly broke into a full sprint toward the exit of the trail where it connected to a residential street, his lungs burning as he ran while the sound of footsteps continued behind him for several seconds before finally fading when he reached the open street and began shouting loudly for help. And when he turned around moments later, the trail behind him was empty, the man gone without any sign of where he had disappeared. And he never saw that silent watcher again after that day. But the experience left him with the unsettling realization that sometimes the people you casually see in ordinary places, like gyms, may be paying far more attention to you than you ever realize, and that the routines we trust the most can occasionally hide the kind of obsession that only reveals itself when it has already gone too far.